was about 12 years old, while my family still lived in Scotland, I remember one occasion when my mom came to me and she said, Jim, my family called me Jim, by the way. I said, my family called me Jim, not my parishioners. She said, Jim, there's a group of Jehovah's Witnesses going around the neighborhood. Now, does anyone know who the Jehovah's Witnesses are? They're kind of a Christian, semi-Christian sect that go around and knock on people's doors to try to convert people. So she said, if they come to our door, you've got to be polite to them, but this is what I want you to say. No, thank you, I'm a practicing Catholic. Now, I hadn't really heard anything like that before, and my first instinct was to say, well, I don't practice that much. I mean, it's not like I stand in front of the mirror trying to perfect the sign of the cross, and, getting the best genuflection, like going like this. I mean, when it came to practicing, I was all about practicing football. And notice I said football, not soccer, right? Football. Or as we said in Glasgow, fitball. So, but I did find out that in another way, I was a practicing Catholic because we went to Mass every Sunday. We said our prayers before we went to bed. But other than that, I didn't give it too much thought. In many ways, my sense of faith was practiced at a very external level, a very surface level. It was at the level of externals. And it wasn't until years later, looking back, that I realized that although I had been a practicing Catholic, that I actually had never known Jesus in a personal way. It wasn't until I encountered him in a new way that I realized what I hadn't had. I had known about him. I could have told you information about him, but I hadn't known him. And I had little interest or hunger to really learn or grow. I hadn't surrendered my life to him, and he wasn't at the center of my life. James Mallon was at the center of my life. I mean, in that regard, not a lot has really changed, but I'm trying, okay? I'm trying to kick out this James Mallon guy from the center. That's a lifelong, ongoing battle. In the gospel today, Jesus says, my Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. That you bear much fruit and become my disciples. We also hear this word disciple being used in the first reading. We hear about St. Paul after his conversion. He had been called Saul. He had been a persecutor of the church. He encounters Jesus in a life-changing way. And he goes to Jerusalem, and everyone's afraid of him. And the Acts of the Apostles says that the disciples in Jerusalem were afraid of him because they did not believe that Paul had become a disciple. So we see that in the early church, in the teachings of Jesus, becoming a disciple is pretty darn important. It's the main thing. So what does this word mean? Well, it can be translated as follower. It literally means a learner or a student, someone who's learning. Now, back in those days, you followed a teacher. You literally were a follower. You literally followed the person around. Because you lived with them, you ate with them, you listened to their teachings. You sought to become like that person. And that's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Someone who is seeking to become like Jesus by being with Jesus, coming to know him. Someone who knows the Lord, who loves the Lord, and is at least trying to surrender his or her life to him. You see, Jesus didn't say, my Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become practicing Catholics. It has to go deeper than the external practices. Even Jesus said, unless your faith goes deeper than that of the Pharisees, the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of God. Our faith cannot remain at the surface level of religious practice. It's why our parish purpose statement focuses on this concept of discipleship. When we boil everything down, this is what we have discerned is our core purpose as a parish, to make joyful disciples. Notice the intentional use of joyful. Well, we don't need more miserable Christians in the world. You know, one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is joy. When the Holy Spirit fills our heart, we experience supernatural joy. So we want to make joyful disciples, people who have encountered Jesus, who want to follow him, know his joy, who form a community. We're not just a bunch of strangers who intersect 1 hour a week. And that's one of the fatal flaws in how we've done church in these last number of decades, is it's become this anonymous experience of. But we want to form a community, not an inward-focused community, but a community that overflows in faith and charity, a community that touches and transforms the larger community. And we believe that if this happens, we will move slowly to become what we envision. And our vision is for our parish to be the heart of Dartmouth. We're not saying we already are that. We're not. But I believe we're moving in that direction. To be a community of disciples, not just a collection of practicing Catholics. In 1992, the U.S. bishops released a landmark pastoral letter that had an impact far beyond the boundaries of the United States. And this pastoral letter was called Stewardship, a Disciple's Response. And it described a practical spirituality that those who had become disciples should live out. And the critical point here was something that Deacon David mentioned in his homily last week, that we are stewards. We're not owners. What is the difference? Well, when you own something, you own it. When you're a steward, it's being given to you, it's being put into your care. But you're not an owner. St. Paul says, what do we have that we have not received? You see, to live as a disciple is to live as a steward, to realize that everything we have is a gift. It's a gift, and it's been entrusted to us. And so the precious gift of time has been entrusted to us. Our talents that God has given us, and our finances, our material possessions have all been given to us. And disciples begin by recognizing that we receive everything as a gift and that we're called to give back to God in accordance with what has been given to us. Now, if you've been around here the last few weeks, you know that this weekend is the third and the last week in our annual 3-week preaching series on the topic of... You're not so sure about that, are you? At the Saturday Mass, about half the people said giving and the other half said money. Well, I guess both are right. It's the annual 3-week series on the topic of giving, of financial giving. And if you're here today for the first time, all I can say is, lucky you. Let's look back 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we started by looking at the question, why do we give? Why? And we suggested that we give to fund the mission of the church. We don't give to the church because we are the church. If you think that you give to the church, well, what's your understanding of your relationship with the church? Our starting point is that you are the church. We are the church. We give for the sake of the mission of the church. And we don't just give to pay the bills. We give so that we can change the world. We reject the concept of minimalism. Last week, Deacon David looked at the question, how do we give? He began by showing that our attitude towards material wealth is a deeply spiritual matter. It's, in fact, of all the teachings of Jesus, it's the thing he talked about the most, our attitude towards money. Deacon David talked about how our giving should be intentional. It should be informed. That's why last week we gave out our annual finance report and asked everyone to go through this carefully to go through this. to be informed, to be intentional, to actually not just, grab whatever spare change is around, but actually sit down and plan, make a decision about how much we'll give. That giving should be proportional, and this is such a key point. The value of our gift is not the amount. It is the proportion to what we have. Because someone who's giving a large amount could actually be giving very, very little. And a child who has a $10 a week allowance who gives 50 cents, what a marvelous gift. What a marvelous gift that is, a huge gift. So proportionality. And the third one, sacrificial. Don't give out of your leftovers. And that's often what we're tempted to do. We pay all our bills, we take care of our wants and our needs, and then we've got this left over, so I'll give a part of this to charity. And because what we're talking about today is not just about giving to the parish, it's about giving in general. We all give to, I'm sure, to many different charities. We give back to God first. This week, I'd like to look at the steps we can take to grow in our giving. Steps that will likely reflect our growth as disciples. Because we need to be intentional about growing in generosity. Let me ask you a question. If we're not intentional about growing in generosity, if we're just neutral, are we going to drift towards being generous or drift away from being generous? What do you think? Away. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but naturally, I don't think it's just me, but full disclosure, naturally, I'm selfish. Anyone else? Naturally, I'm fearful. There's this innate fear that we're never going to have enough. We want to hoard. It's evolutionary. It's biological. Look out for number one. And so if we're going to be generous, if we're going to be a giving person, we have to be intentional about it. We've got to actually take action. And I think when it comes to giving, our giving will reflect where we are spiritually. And so what I have to say in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to invite you to receive it in accordance with your faith, in accordance with where you are spiritually right now. Because I know that many people here today will say, well, yeah, I am a disciple of Jesus. And some may say, well, I'm not sure yet, or I'm on a journey on my way to becoming a disciple. And some may say, I don't think I'm a disciple at all, but I'm open. So wherever we are, I invite you to receive this. In the second reading today, St. John said, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action. God doesn't want our giving to be motivated by guilt, shame, or obligation, or any kind of pressure, but by love. It's love that motivates us to give. Our love of God and our love of neighbor. Okay, so I have 7 steps I want to quickly go through with you. And perhaps one of these steps might speak to you. And my invitation to us today is to consider taking one of these steps. Okay, step number 1 is give something. So perhaps you're here and you've been coming for a while, and you're curious, or you've just joined the community, and presently you don't give anything. And I'm not saying that in any judgmental ways, because for many, many years, I used to go to church, and I gave nothing. Like seriously, I gave nothing. I somehow thought it didn't apply to me. It was other people had to do that. And so there are many different reasons, but if you're here today and you presently give nothing, maybe the step for you is to give something. And I want to speak in a particular way to any teenagers or children. And any kids here today who get an allowance? Yeah, we didn't have any at the last Mass either. You saw the hands go. But see, we all have something. The Lord invites us to give proportionally. Here's the thing. If we don't start now, if we don't start when we're young, learning how to sacrifice and be generous, when is it going to start? If we allow our innate selfishness and fear to control us, it will control us. And so we need to learn these habits to create a habit of giving. So I invite young people today, if you're here in church today, give something. Give something. Give a $1 a week or something like that. I don't know. Work it out. Okay. Step 1. Good to go? Step 2. Perhaps you are giving, but it's more kind of accidental. There's no real thought or planning behind it. And my invitation to you, perhaps the step God is calling you to make, is to actually be intentional. To get informed, read this report, do the math. We're all doing our taxes right now, right? Or we should be. And for me, tax year is always a time for me to say, okay, what was my total household income? And I look at all the receipts from the charities that I give to, and I sit down and I do the math. Have you ever done the math? Look at what percentage do you give based on what you have? It's a very interesting exercise. It can be very revealing. You might be giving much more than you think. You might be giving much less than you think. So do the math and prayerfully discern. Say, Lord, what are you calling me to do? Give me the faith. Give me the love to respond. Make a decision. Consult with your spouse or significant other and make a commitment. Be intentional. Okay, number 3. You ready for number 3? Number 3 is sign up for automated giving. Now, we're all familiar with automated giving. It's how we pay our mobile bills and our internet bills and a whole bunch of other bills. But sometimes, often when it comes to church, people say, oh no, I can't do that. Sometimes we look at giving to the church the way we would go to the movies. I mean, if you don't go to the movies, do you buy a ticket? Hello? No. But sometimes we think that if I don't go to church, I don't give. But we're a family. We're a family with a mission. And so automated giving, this is the way that I give, because by the way, you know that when you give, you're not giving it to me. I do, everything I'm talking about today, I do too. And so I give, it comes out of my account once a month, and I don't have to worry about it because I used to have a really bad memory. Like when I used to use envelopes, half the time I'd forget to use them. And the other thing too, if you're here and you're giving and you give cash, you're missing the opportunity for a tax receipt. Now let me just speak for a second to new Canadians, because when my family first came to Canada, in Scotland where I came from, we always just put cash in. We didn't do this thing with envelopes and tax receipts. We thought, this is really weird. And, but you're in Canada now, and it's a very common thing to do, so I really encourage you to do it. Besides, who would you rather give your money to, Justin or Jesus? And when we get a tax receipt, we can actually give more to Jesus and less to Justin. So, it also gives us predictability. It gives us some financial security. So perhaps that's a step that you can take, and you can get the forms. They were handed out last week with these, but the form for automated giving you can find at the welcome desk today. Okay, how you doing so far? No one's had a heart attack yet, right? Okay, next step, increase by 1%. This is 1% of household income. Perhaps this is a step you can take. So maybe you're already intentional, you're already committed, a committed giver. Would you pray about increasing 1%? That one's self-explanatory. This is my plan. I've been praying about this. This is my step for this year. And again, we're talking about proportion here. So even by increasing 1%, depending on what has happened in someone's life, it doesn't necessarily reflect the amount. Do you know what I mean? Like, if your income goes down, the amount goes down too. But the proportion can be the same or can increase. Okay, I hope that made some kind of sense. Okay, you ready for the next one? It's to try tithing. Deacon David spoke about this last week. It's about giving according to the biblical standard of 10%, to give 10% back to God. In the Old Testament, there was even the sense that the tithe, didn't belong to us. It's not ours to begin with. We give it back to God. Now, this might seem like a crazy big step, but there may be people ready to do this. You know, for me, it took 8 years from when I started to give to the point where I tithed. It took me 8 years to do it. And I've been tithing for almost 20 years now. And I could say a lot more about this, but I think I'm going to wear a little pin that says, "Ask me about tithing." Because there are all kinds of benefits to it, and it's been an incredible blessing in my life. It's so much fun. I'll tell you this, it's so much fun every year to calculate out 10%, and my starting point is, this isn't mine. I get to give it away. It's a blast. It's a lot of fun. And when people, other than what I commit to, come and ask for money, I'm quite free to say, sorry, my giving this year is already committed, because I've been intentional about it. And God blesses us when we sacrifice in this way. Okay. Finally, or not finally, just two more things. Another possible step is generous giving, and that's giving beyond a 10%. In every parish I've ever been in, there have been parishioners who have stepped forward to give in a very generous way, sometimes to support like a staffing position or to directly support an initiative of some kind. There's been people like this in every parish I've ever been in, and there are people like that in this parish as well. Finally, legacy giving. Legacy giving is what you do with your money after you don't need it anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this, the countless numbers of churches over the years have been blessed by parishioners who have remembered their parishes in their wills. And so there are all different kinds of ways that can happen. We'd love to have a conversation with you if that's something you would like to consider. And we ourselves, our parish, has been blessed tremendously by parishioners who have remembered the parish in their estate planning. So, 7 possible steps. Here's what I'm asking. Please give prayerful consideration. Remember, not to be motivated by guilt, obligation. It's motivated by love, according to your faith, according to where you are. Ask the Lord to direct you about how the Lord is calling you to grow in support of the mission. Jesus said, "It's the will of my Father that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." When we grow in generosity and support the mission of the church, we won't just be practicing Catholics. We will become disciples. We won't just pay the bills, but we will bear much fruit and become a community that overflows in faith and charity to become the heart of Dartmouth.